Welcome in to Greenville Grit, Greenville residents in touch on 103.7 WTIB. This is the local show that keeps you connected and in touch with the issues that affect what's happening in your community. Greenville Grit is sponsored by Ribeyes, Kid Construction, and Greenville Toyota. Now, here are your hosts for Greenville Grit, Terry Williams and Michael Overton.
Good evening and welcome to Greenville Grit. I'm Terry Williams.
I'm Michael Overton, and
I'm Dennis Mitchell.
Dennis, thank you for coming back on the show today.
No problem.
Got a few things to talk about. Of course, we really haven't talked about city council stuff, and it's been probably about a month.
Yeah,
so
it's been a while.
They've given us quite a few things to discuss.
Oh, yeah.
All the time.
Fun discussion, and of course, before we do it, Terry, we always have to thank the sponsors we have. Why don't you start out with that?
Well, let's just start with Ribeyes today.
Man.
I love all our sponsors, but Ribeyes is really good. I love their salad bar.
Yeah, and they've got a new Greenville Grit gift today. If you go in there and mention Greenville Grit at Ribeye Steakhouse on Fire Tower Road, or in Williamston, you get a free dessert with the purchase of a meal.
Yum. That's really good.
You go to Ribeye Steakhouse.
And then we've got Greenville Toyota. They've been with us from the very beginning, and we appreciate it so much. You know the contact numbers by heart.
321-3000 or on the web at greenvilletoyota.com. Right. You can also see them across from Fresh Market on Memorial Drive. If you're looking for a new Toyota Scion vehicle, go see Craig Ghost and the Greenville Toyota team. Also, the Overton Group.
Yep.
Real estate professionals with an office in Greenville and in New Bern, serving all of eastern North Carolina for business brokers, commercial real estate leasing sales, residential real estate, and property management. And, of course, Kid Construction Group. If you're looking for a new home, a green home, go look up KCGBuildGreen.com. Bill Kidd is the proprietor of that business, a good friend of mine, and builds a wonderful product. We're going to take a quick 2-minute commercial break, come right back, and we'll get into city politics with Dennis Mitchell, our Greenville Gritter. Welcome back to the Greenville Grit. I am Michael Overton, along with my co-hosts, Terry Williams and Dennis Mitchell. Thank you guys for being on the show today on this wonderfully rainy day.
Yes.
Dennis, again, we haven't had you on here in a while, but we've had a couple of city council meetings, and they've given us a little bit to talk about here. One of the things that we have heard since the beginning was the fiscal irresponsibility of the city council when you guys were in there 2 years ago, and how the auditor gave a warning to us about drawing down our cash reserves, and how fiscally responsible the new council is planning to be. Let's go into the subject, starting with your irresponsibility when you were the at-large.
Don't forget uncivil. We were uncivil too. Well, when you think about it and you realize what we did, the auditors pretty much came at it and said if you continue the spending down what you've done in the past, it wouldn't be good for you.
Right.
Well, and I think that's the key.
Yeah.
And that's what they're taking words and twisting those words. It's saying if you continue to draw down your reserves. It didn't say you're at a low level.
Right.
It didn't say that you're in immediate danger. It said you're actually good, but obviously just a warning. Just be careful not to draw your reserves down.
And which was never the plan. It was one-time spending that was used towards roads, infrastructure with the city as far as the technology system and things like that. So it was never a plan to continue doing that. We had excess fund balance over the 14%. We spent that on infrastructure that was needed. Now you're at the 14%, so they say. I don't think we ever got a concrete whether we there or not, but you're there, and you should not spend below it. I agree with the auditors. I think everyone agrees. Your policy is 14%. Do not spend below that 14%.
And again, that is Greenville's policy of having that, but the state recommendation is 8%. So again, we're significantly higher.
Over. Well over what the state recommends, which is good.
Oh yeah, you're well over it. But I mean, we go back to again when you try to balance the two city councils, since they always want to keep on looking back instead of looking forward and what they're concentrating on. When you balance the two city councils, we did what I think was fiscally responsible. You have infrastructure that's crumbling. You had a lot of needs going on in the city, and you had more money in the bank account that you needed. I think anyone in any household would have took that money and took care of those repairs while still keeping your family on solid footing. And that's what we did on the city council, as opposed to this council, who believes in keeping a lot of money in the bank and then raising taxes to put more money in the bank while the infrastructure is still crumbling. And at any given time, when this city council first started, that road money hasn't been spent. So they thought it was a bad idea. They could have stopped it, repurposed it, and went about their business. But they continue to spend it because they know our roads is a serious issue. So, I mean, I really want to hear the discussion coming from them is you can't have it both ways.
Right.
How are you going to take care of these infrastructure issues if you're not going to use the money that you have available to do so?
And how much money is enough?
Yeah.
At what point is 14% enough? But and we've had this discussion before, or do we need to raise it to 18% or 20%? If 14% seems to be a concern, then they need to, as a policy, raise it to a higher level. But me as a taxpayer, I've got an issue that if a fifth of what I put in, if it's 20%, is sitting in a reserve fund, and that money's not being spent, and the roads will send you to Pew's Tire every few weeks because you knock your car out of alignment, I have a concern with that. My money's not being spent. The money that I'm giving to the city on what is undoubtedly one of the higher tax rates of all municipalities in the state, regardless of whether our price per acre, our value per acre, is half of what Asheville is, we're still one of the higher on a per 1,000 rate.
And Councilmember Jordan used to say it all the time. I mean, the taxpayers don't pay taxes so the city can have a big bank account. They pay taxes for services. And then that's what we need to do. Being prudent, fiscal responsible means taking that citizens' money and investing it the right way, using the infrastructure. And anyone in business knows you don't judge the what your business is worth by the amount of money in your bank account. You have to look at your assets too.
Right.
If your assets are crumbling, they're worth less value. So, I mean, you're still in a bad situation.
So at this past month's city council meeting, did they not pass to spend $2 million or allocated $2 million toward more road repair?
What they did
what was exactly?
There was that $2 million more though?
They're still spending the money that we allocated 2 years ago.
Okay.
The money that they claimed that we were fiscally irresponsible, they're just now allocating that to an actual project. So we set aside the money for the roads. They're coming up now. Now the public works director said, okay, these are the roads we need to fix, and this is the amount of money we need. And all they did was, okay, yes, we're allocating that money to it.
What was the original allocation amount?
What was it, $4 or $5 million?
$4 or $5 million.
I can't remember which one it was.
Just for public.
Yeah, so here
to recall.
Yeah,
I've heard 5, and then but more recently I've heard 4.
4 point something.
I can't remember.
Yeah.
Off the top of my head, but I mean that's all they did. So again, they could have said no, we need to put that money back in our fund balance. But no, they chose to allocate it towards the spending of the roads because it was a great idea. It needed to be done.
It does need to be done. However, we're all involved in the bond advisory committee discussions, and so that's one thing I wanted cleared up because it made it sound like to the public that it was $2 million new, but it was actually, like you said, allocated previously. And so what roads were chosen that were originally given to us on the bond committee that needed repair, are these different from the list that we've been discussing in the bond committee meeting that they're going to spend the $2 million on? Was it a previous list or some of the same roads?
It's a previous list.
So they're completely different roads than what what Kevin Mulligan's department had given us to discuss to see if we could make that work in the bond.
Yes.
Okay, because that was a little confusing, and I don't think the general public would even understand it.
I mean, yeah, it's confusing because we were told that the roads are in disrepair. We allocated money. They selected projects for that money, and then they came back and said, now we need to do a study on all the roads to see which ones are really bad.
Right.
So we spent $5 million without checking which ones are really bad. Now we're going to spend the bond money, and hopefully the council will be fiscal responsible and start spending what's needed to keep the roads in good repair, because that's another issue.
Right.
We heard all over and over again, we need $2.5 million allocated a year to take care of our roads, and we only been spending about $300,000 to take care of our roads.
And I think a lot of the discussion that Mr. Boardman is a Greenville resident who's been very critical of this council and their spending habits or say saving habits. Part of it was the vehicle replacement fund that all of a sudden now is being drawn down and being reallocated. And we talk about the fund balance, but I think where people, and tell me if I'm wrong on this, Dennis, where people may lose sight is there could still be many funds with plenty of cash sitting in there that is allocated. It's not part of the 14% fund balance. It's already allocated, but it's not being used, and it could possibly sit there for years without being used. Is that correct?
Oh, yeah. And I think that's good for having a watchdog like Terry Borman to really point that out. We have a lot of passive funds sitting in these other accounts that are part of these other funds, like the health insurance fund, the vehicle replacement fund, and others that are just sitting there, collecting dust and not.
Well, they're not collecting interest.
They're not collecting interest. So this really all boils down back to we really didn't need the 1 cent that last tax increase anyway. They could have searched, like he has, into these other balances and come up with that difference that they felt like they were going to lose in the privilege license. They were trying to make up for that loss with that tax raise, and that just doesn't make sense. They just simply hadn't done their homework.
Yeah, I don't think anyone thinks now that we needed that tax rate,
No.
including the current city council people who voted on it.
I've had some discussion with them, and some of them do feel that way.
It was a knee-jerk reaction. We have enough cash.
Dennis, it was not a one-time knee-jerk reaction.
Well, it was
a three-time
It was a three-time knee-jerk
over a
reaction.
3 or 4 week period.
And I mean, it was really terrible that we had to go there, because in the midst of us talking about this bond, I really think we probably could have did a lot bigger and bolder package than what we have to deal with now, because we're trying to present something reasonable, something that we think may pass, the citizens could be interested in. But we could have did something very big and bold for Greenville and invest in a lot of these projects. So our property values can go up. We can get a lot more tax value from that, for those properties, and then never have to raise taxes.
Well, when you really look at it, back when they had the discussion on the privilege licenses, is when they should have gone into these other funds and looked where they could make up the difference before they even started discussing raising the license
Because that 1
fees
cent
anyway.
only brought in around $500,000-600,000.
Something like
and
that.
We've already confirmed we had at least $2 million more than we needed just in the vehicle replacement fund.
No, but what they were going to do by raising it was raise the incoming amount to a little over $1 million, I guess, or 900,000 or $1 million. So for the privilege licenses, that's what they were trying to do. But when I'm looking at all these balances, we didn't need to do that.
Neutral. I don't like that term being
I
used.
know.
No, it's the
Because
term.
revenue neutral, all that's saying is going back to the days of lore when the tax rate was higher.
Right.
Oh, we're just getting back, so we're revenue neutral. That doesn't mean that was the right rate.
No, it's a term that I think politicians coined to make them not appear to be raising taxes,
Right.
but it's exactly what you're doing. You're raising taxes to keep bringing in the same amount of money that you were bringing in before. So, I mean, it was a tax increase. That's why we were against it. And look what we did. You know, we talking about being fiscally responsible. I know we harp on this a lot, but we really delved into that budget and forced the city staff to look inward and say, okay,
Right.
how can we do things different? This time they didn't do it, you know, and look what we're faced with.
And I don't think it's obvious they haven't even done it lately. What I'm saying is they're not even looking at it now to see either how they can correct their mistake. They're just not doing anything about it.
The focus on this council is clearly, this is not a council that comes from a financial background that are really
Right.
into numbers. And so as you can see, so it's like, you know, let's just do something that appears to work and hope it works. And I'm about to say focus on other things, but I don't even know what else they're focusing on right now. We're what are we in almost a year into their first
Year over year.
Yeah, a little over a year into their first session, and what this council has to hang their hat on. I mean,
Right.
a repeal of the foreign related,
Yeah.
which
Yeah,
is really
almost
not
a
a
year.
repeal. I mean, you got 45 people, their houses, their homes, that are able to have the 4-person in there. But what else have this council did other than raise taxes?
Well,
3
let's
times?
talk. Well, I think that leads us into good discussion. Dennis, we talked about before the show, and Calvin Mercer sent his email out, and it gave us a few points to talk about that we can cover. The one thing, there are 2 things that I remember when we ran, even though I had nothing to do with it, that was on you guys, but were extremely political during the thing was the 4-person rule for having 4 unrelated people living together, which only affected one area, but they tried to keep saying they're going to bring it to a neighborhood near you. And the other one was council raises. Now, obviously, the first one was, and Calvin mentioned raises in his email. This is why I want to bring this up. So the first one, they repealed almost immediately. Have you heard anything about them repealing their raises? Because that was obviously a very political thing for them and a big concern of how it was handled.
Yeah, absolutely not. I mean, the council they had a $100 million $100 million budget. They focused on a $100 raise for the city council. Council that hasn't had a raise in 1998. Since 1998, so it was almost 20 years. So he chose to focus on that because I mean it sounds good for a political soundbite. But what we got to understand is, and I want people to understand, it's part of the fallacy that he's putting out there, is he says that he wants to put it in place so if the council passes a raise, it's effective for the next city council. Well, city governments in North Carolina do not work like that. Each sitting a member legislative body is responsible for their budget. So we cannot pass a raise for a future city council.
Right.
But what Calvin Mercer and gang could have done this year was said, okay, you know, we made this a big issue. We didn't believe in raises, so let's repeal it. Let's repeal the $1,200. put it back in the budget, put it in the fund balance, whatever makes them happy. But they chose not to do that. So the very raises that he's railroaded against, he voted back in this year.
Yep.
Which is a very
So tell
important
us how
point.
much the city council members make.
I think with the raise, $700 a month.
I mean, think about the time and the hours, really. I mean, it's not.
It's nothing.
It's not.
I don't
Not
think
a
there's a question
significant
of
amount
anything.
of
And the
money.
only reason I brought it up is
Yeah.
this: it isn't compared to what is involved and how much time a really good city council person would have to dedicate to the
Right.
job. It is pennies, and it's no different than the state legislature. They don't make anything. Frankly, I don't understand. Of course, then again, we sometimes question why we can't get better people to run.
Right.
Because it costs them money to run.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I couldn't be a state legislator. I think they make $11,000 a
It's
year.
14, 15.
Yeah, I
it's
mean,
terrible.
It's a little bit more now, but it's not.
I mean, how can you do that? Leave your job for 6 months
Yeah,
and go do that? I
it's
mean,
very
you
difficult.
have to either be retired rich or someone who can just leave your business a lot. And a lot of people who do it. And a lot of people get involved in city council. And I think you can ask Chip Little this, you can ask Max Joyner this, Brian Kittrell, people who own small businesses. You know, things kind of like level out or probably go down a little bit while you're on council because you're focusing a lot on doing city's business rather than focusing on your business. So you really got to do it because you love it.
Well, in regards to the council salaries, one thing I'm sorry to interrupt Dennis. He put elected officials should not raise their own salaries, which you said they're responsible for their own
They
budget.
have to. That's the only
That's
way it
in
can
their
be
own
done.
budget.
But the second thing was any salary increases should be widely debated and have much public input. Now, that was one of the criticisms that you guys had was that you did not have public input on the salary increases.
Which is the same thing they did with the tax increase. I mean,
Yeah.
and if you look at it really in perspective, what happened is we were going through the budget process. We made some changes the day of the budget. No one showed up for the public hearing. We made some changes the day of the budget, and it was brought to our attention there was additional monies. So we spent some on extra lighting and security cameras. There was a few other things. There were about 4 or 5 other things that we spent money on, and the $1,200 for the city council raises. And we did all this without raising taxes. And I think that's one of the important things to note, that we looked at what we had and did it all without raising taxes. And the raise and the council raise, if I recall correctly, was for gas. It was that's what we said
Right.
it was for gas. You know, just the cost of living adjustment for gas. And it wasn't for everybody. You got to realize on city council, you have a wide spectrum. Some people do quite well for themselves.
Right.
And some people, you know, live check to check. I mean, it's obvious evidence. So
And some council members go to more things, have more expenses.
Oh, yeah.
If they're able to be involved more and can choose to do that, then it's going to obviously cost them a little bit more. Well, I have a question about public input. Are there certain issues automatically that require public input?
Public
and
hearings?
certain issues that it's not required, and they can go ahead and you can go ahead as a city council and make a
anytime
decision.
you do an ordinance, and
Okay.
there's a public input session, and passing a budget is pretty much passing a budget ordinance.
Okay.
And anytime the council requests it. But of course, the public can be involved and engaged all the time. You have the public comment session before the city council and things like that. But those are the required times when you're about to pass an ordinance.
So the agenda of each meeting is printed ahead of time. So the public, everybody has access to it that has a computer, basically, but I guess you could go get a copy. So they have an opportunity to show up for public hearings if there's something on that agenda that they want to talk about. Like, was the salary increase not on the agenda? Or
No.
you don't remember?
I mean,
on-
was it- the budget
came
was on
up,
the
the
agenda.
budget was, and it
Yeah,
came up in budget discussion.
It came up in budget discussion. The process worked the way it was supposed to work. You have your public hearing, and if people come, you hear what they say.
Right?
And then you take that in consideration. You get your staff comments and things like that, and then you tweak the budget to prepare your final budget.
Right.
And that's what happens. That's what they
Exactly.
did this year as well.
Well, I'm not certainly not objecting to public input, but I also have something in the back of my mind with this particular city council is they're afraid to make decisions on their own too. I don't see them getting all their information. When we get more information together sometimes than they have, and then make a good decision and vote. They were elected to vote to make good decisions. I'm not saying don't listen to the public, but then they are responsible for making their own good decisions.
Well, I mean, you have a representative. You're a representative of government. People elect you to be their representative
Right.
because they think that you either are like-minded, you have their vision, their views in mind, and they hope that you're gonna make the best decision. That's why they elect you. But I think it goes more with this city council. I think everything they do is very politically calculated. They're not weighing the public good; they weighing what's good to keep themselves in office. And I
Right.
think that's a tragedy.
I think that leads us right into our third part of the discussion.
does.
One of the things that Mr. Mercer had proposed was considering changing the terms of the city council people from 2 years to 4 years. What is your opinion?
I think, and I mean, it's something that can be looked at. I mean, it's hard to look at it thinking about this city council. I'm just going to be honest.
It is.
I mean, you want a council, to me, a council of action, a council going to get things done, not a caretaker council. And I think that's what we had. Like I said, over a year they've been in office. We haven't really seen anything from them. Mr. Mercer himself been in city council for 8 years, and I don't think has put forth one initiative.
So
on its
here's
own.
what I would say: if you're going to do 4-year terms, then you got to have a 2-term limit.
And I agree with that. I mean,
Absolutely. If
Right.
you've been there
There'd
8
have to be
years, you've been
something.
there long enough.
I agree
don't
with that.
care what party you are, if
Right.
you're Republican, you're Democrat, you're Independent, whatever. Lifelong politicians are not good for our city, our state, or our country.
No, power corrupts. When people who stay in power long enough, they begin to think it's about them and not about what is really about the citizens of Greenville.
Sometimes they and I understand. I mean, I hate to call it denial, but sometimes that happens, and
Right.
it happens in ways they don't even realize it, but where it does become about that. I mean, and it's a power thing. I don't know if I'm really for it. If I was to look at the 4-year, I would say definitely do the term limits. I think you need to do term limits anyway. I think 8 years is plenty of time enough for anyone to be on council. I don't quite understand how we got off our time with the state representatives, because they're coming up this November.
And they're
City
2-year
council is
terms.
coming, and they're 2-year
They're
terms.
2-year terms. I definitely
So,
would not go for 4-year
I
terms.
would either be,
I could never
say,
agree to
fine,
that.
keep it on 2 years. Maybe one council would have to have 3 years to get us back on
Maybe,
the state
that's right.
schedule, because we really should be voting. Otherwise, we're having elections every single year.
Well, it's
and
expensive
exhausting.
too to
Very
do that. It's
expensive.
very expensive for a
Of
board
course,
of
the
elections.
media market doesn't want to hear that because they like
I
these
know,
things.
they do, but I definitely think that needs to be thought about. But I just cannot see putting certain councils in for 4 years. I just don't think it's a good idea.
Well, I think we need to go and take our second commercial
All
break.
right.
We're going to come back, wrap the show
Sounds
up,
good.
and so we'll be back in 2 minutes.
Welcome back to the Greenville Grit. Of course, it's me, Dennis Mitchell, Terry Williams, and Michael Overton. We're in the bottom half or the bottom portion of
Try
our
the bottom
Yeah.
3 minutes.
The
the
Three
bottom
minutes.
3 minutes of our show. And
We
what do
give
got?
you the scraps, man.
Yeah, I know, right? Slim pickings here. So what we got?
Well, I don't know. One
Yeah.
of the things in the paper today, and,
Oh, yeah.
and it was a
Oh,
really
yes.
cool surprise for my family and for the people of the neighborhood, was with the mural that was uncovered at the old Overton supermarket on Jarvis Street. I
That's
was not
awesome.
expecting that
Oh
at
yeah.
all.
When I saw it on pictures on Facebook, I was thinking somebody might have photoshopped it, but then when I drove by it, I was like, wow.
Yeah, it's really
I mean,
cool.
I
love
didn't know
seeing
if it was
history
on
like that.
wood, but it was on brick. Jim Blunt actually sent me the picture, said good stuff. It was really cool. Tandy's been all over at Christie's Jury Pub.
Yeah.
Bianca's been on it.
Isn't it
Daily
great-
Reflector's already called, and of
It's
course
great
it's in
about
the paper
the
today.
colors were preserved.
Oh, I
think
know.
that's awesome
It was
too.
fascinating
And
to see that.
I don't know. I've not spoken with my dad or my uncle to understand when that was put up. I believe the facade was bricked over on that building, because that building started out, and a lot of people don't know the history, but if you really look at the front, although those bricks are all the scrape type, you can almost see the sections as the building was added onto. That was a neighborhood with all the houses on both sides of the streets.
Right.
And so as my grandfather could buy a house, he would expand the store one house width at a time. And that's how it ended up being that entire block. And you can kind of see that in some of the color variations. But sometime in the late 60s, the facade was put on. And of course, I guess it was an appropriate facade for the 60s and 70s. But to see that was really cool. And we would love to have a neighborhood market there to come back, and something that would be an anchor, or a couple of cool restaurants. I mean, with all that's going on in Uptown Greenville, we hope that that'll spill over to that neighborhood and be a
Be such a great
Good thing.
extension
I
of
mean,
what's
and
going
the
on.
neighborhood is so densely populated. You think that can be a thriving
Right.
neighborhood center there.
I think
A
so,
great
too.
place
Well,
to
so
walk.
much has come back. I mean, so much that so many people had written off years ago. And when I say years ago, even 5-10 years ago, have been written off, has really come back. And, of course, you guys putting 4 unrelated people probably stalled the process, Dennis. Thank you so much. I'm kidding. Crime is down. Things are looking really good in the
Yeah,
neighborhood there.
it
And,
is.
Parking decks going up, new construction downtown,
downtown's
super
looking
block.
great.
and you've got the Dickinson Avenue Public House. I don't know if you saw the mural inside there. It looks really
not seen
nice.
Mm-hmm.
That was also in the paper today. So it's cool to see that history coming back and trying to preserve as much as you can. And I think for us, Terry and
Yeah.
Dennis, sometimes people like to put you in slots. So this is the kind of person you are.
Right.
Whether it's a pro-jobs type person or pro-green type person. And I think that shows that we do care about the neighborhood.
Exactly.
We're spending a significant amount of money on speculation because we don't have a tenant.
That's right.
And hoping that it will help bring that neighborhood back and bring the business back.
That's
Well,
right.
a lot of people don't understand. I mean, your background in historic preservation.
I was chairman of it
That's
for 5
right.
years.
Exactly. So I mean, that's something that you have a passion for, and everyone talks about you. They can hear it come through. Just amazing to see all the pieces coming together downtown. I mean, I think we're a city on the move. I mean,
That's right.
regardless of the politics that's going on, Greenville wants to grow.
Well, there's a lot of stuff going on outside of downtown.
Yes, there is.
Things. Memorial Drive is on fire right now. There's a
is.
lot of projects in the works and some exciting things. I can't talk about who or what they are. I know of a few things coming in, but I think it'll be great for that side
growth
of town.
on Fire
And
Tower.
Fire Tower, especially on
It's
the west
amazing.
side, is really growing. Bells Fork area is continuing to grow, and even 10th Street. Once that corridor is done, that's going to be really interesting. To see the explosiveness of rehabilitation on 10th Street once that whole
And I got something in the
corridor's
mail
finished.
the other day. Planet Fitness is coming to Greenville somewhere.
That's going in the old Home Depot. Planet Fitness is coming, and Burlington Goat Factory should be opening soon, I believe.
Any day. I can't remember the day, but it's opening any day.
So, and then all that vacant land next to it. I mean, there's some things going on. There's a lot
That's
going on.
right. There is a lot
There's
going on. We should be
on.
very excited. It's a great place to be in Greenville
Well,
right
in
now.
Greenville, usually what happens in commercial real estate is as populations hit certain areas.
That's right.
I think 100,000 really is the next one, and once it hits that, it'll be really
That's
blowing
right.
up.
Well, if you listen to John Van Kutren, it was all because of last year's city council. Even though
There
he
you
said
go.
5 years, and say 2 years.
Well, we have to thank the
couple of
sponsors to
things.
allow this show to be possible. Of course, the Overton Group, Ribeye Steakhouse, you get a free dessert if you mention Greenville Grit.
That's right.
Greenville Toyota and Kidd Construction Group. Thank you so much for joining in tonight. We hope
Yes.
that you can also catch us back at 6:30 on Friday night, 9:30 Saturday morning on Cable 7, or even look us up on YouTube. So until then, we will see you next week.